Daniel, a quiet 14-year-old boy from Ohio, discovered a hidden gift for piano after his mother, Maya, bought an old instrument at a garage sale. Under the informal guidance of elderly neighbor Mrs. Grant, whose late husband was a music teacher, Daniel had been growing quietly for 2 months. Now, December had arrived, and everything was about to change. Maya almost didn't post the video. She had recorded it on her phone the night Daniel played his self-written piece, the one that made little Leo say, "Danny." That was really beautiful. It was 2 minutes and 14 seconds long. The lighting was not perfect. The old piano had a slightly worn sound. Daniel's back was to the camera the whole time. You could not even see his face, but you could feel everything. She watched it again the next morning while drinking her coffee before the kids woke up. Then she watched it a second time. Then she opened her phone's video app, typed a simple caption, and posted, "Italiano." She wrote, "My son taught himself piano 2 months ago. He wrote this piece himself. Es 14. I don't have the words, so I'll let the music speak." Then she put her phone down, got ready for her bakery shift, and forgot about it. By the time she came home that afternoon, her phone would not stop buzzing. She pulled it out in the parking lot of the bakery, still wearing her flour-dusted apron. The video had been shared hundreds of times. The comments were pouring in faster than she could read them. "I've watched this 4 times. Why am I crying? This child has a gift. Please get him proper training. The emotion in this playing is something you cannot teach. This is real. I'm a piano teacher of 20 years. This boy is extraordinary." Maya sat in her car for a long time. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from something she could not name. That feeling when the world suddenly confirms what your heart already knew but was afraid to fully believe. She drove home. Daniel was at Mrs. Grant's house when she arrived. Sophie and Leo were doing homework at the kitchen table. Maya sat down between them, still in her coat, and opened the video on her phone. Over 6,000 views. In one day, she thought about calling Daniel home early. Then she decided to wait. She wanted to tell him face to face, calmly, without making it feel overwhelming. Daniel did not do well with sudden big news. She had learned that about him over 14 years. He needed things slow and steady. When he came home at 5:30, she simply said, "Come sit with me." They sat on the couch together, just the two of them. She showed him the phone. He scrolled through the comments slowly, reading each one. His face was hard to read. It always was. But she saw something shift in his eyes. Not excitement exactly. Something quieter than that. Something like recognition, like someone had finally called him by his real name. "People heard it," I sighed softly. "People heard you," Maya replied. He handed the phone back and looked at the wall for a moment. Then he said, "Can I go practice?" She laughed quietly. "Yes, Daniel, go." Within the next week, 3 things happened that Maya had not expected. The first was a message from a music school in Columbus, about 40 minutes from their town. The director had seen the video and wrote a long, careful message. She said the school offered a young artist scholarship for students showing exceptional ability. She said Daniel appeared to meet every criterion. She invited him to come in for an informal evaluation, not an audition. She stressed, just a conversation and a chance to play. The second was a message from a local newspaper reporter who wanted to write a small story. The third was a call from a woman named Carol Simmons, who said she had been a concert pianist in her 30s before an injury ended her performing career. She now lived 45 minutes away. She had watched the video 11 times. She was not asking for money or anything in return. She simply wrote, "If this boy ever needs real guidance, I would like to offer it. Some gifts are too important to leave alone." Maya read that last message 3 times. She thought about Mrs. Grant, who had said almost the same thing in different words, with a cup of tea and an old husband's lesson notes. She thought about how this whole impossible chain had started with a scratched, dusty piano that cost $20 at a garage sale. She thought about how she could have walked past it. She told Mrs. Grant everything on a Tuesday afternoon, sitting in the familiar small living room with its bookshelves and quiet ticking clock. Mrs. Grant listened to everything without interrupting. When Maya finished, the old woman was quiet for a moment. Then she looked out the window and said, "Harold always told me, talent finds its path. You can block it, or you can clear the road, but it always finds the path." She turned back to Maya. "You cleared the road," she said. "Every step of the way, you cleared it." Maya shook her head. "I bought a $20 piano. You saw your son," Mrs. Grant said simply. "Do you know how many parents look at their children every single day and never actually see them? You saw him. That was the beginning of everything." The evaluation at the Columbus Music School happened on a cold Saturday in January. Daniel wore a blue sweater. He was so quiet in the car that Sophie asked him twice if he was okay. He said yes both times, looking out the window at the passing fields of gray winter Ohio. The school was a tall brick building with a proper concert hall inside and practice rooms along the hallways. Small, glass-windowed rooms where you could see students bent over instruments, lost in their own worlds. Daniel stopped walking for a moment just to look through one of the windows at a girl about his age, playing a cello. Maya gently touched his shoulder and they kept walking. The director, Dr. Susan Hawley, was a calm woman in her 50s with reading glasses and an easy smile. She shook Daniel's hand like he was an equal, not a child, which Maya noticed and appreciated. They went into a small room with a beautiful upright piano. Dr. Hawley said, "Daniel, I'm not here to judge you. I'm just here to listen. Play me anything, something you love." Daniel sat down. He played his own piece, the one from that December evening, the one Leo had called beautiful. Dr. Hawley sat completely still the entire time. When he finished, she didn't say anything for several seconds. Then she uncrossed her legs, leaned forward slightly, and said, "Can you play it again? I want to listen to the middle section one more time." He played it again. Afterward, she looked at Maya. "Mrs. Carter," she said quietly, "your son has something that we cannot teach. We can develop it, shape it, give it tools and language and structure. But what lives inside this playing that came with him?" She paused. "I'd like to offer Daniel a full scholarship. Lessons twice a week with our senior instructor. No cost to your family." The room was very quiet. Daniel was looking at his hands in his lap. Maya opened her mouth, but no words came. She pressed her lips together and nodded. The lessons with the senior instructor, a kind, serious man named Mr. Adebayo, began in February. Mr. Adebayo was Nigerian-born, had studied in London, and had performed in concert halls across Europe before settling in Ohio to teach. He was precise and demanding in the best way. He pushed Daniel harder than Mrs. Grant ever had. Not because Mrs. Grant had failed, but because Daniel was now ready for more. The first day, Mr. Adebayo listened to Daniel play, then said, "You play with great feeling. Now we are going to make sure your technique can carry that feeling to any room, any audience, any stage." He placed a piece of sheet music on the stand. "We start here." Daniel looked at the music. Then he looked at Mr. Adebayo. "Will I still be able to write my own pieces?" he asked. Mr. Adebayo smiled. "That is exactly the right question. Yes. Always. The discipline we build here is not a cage. It is wings." Spring came slowly to Ohio. Daniel turned 15 in March. Maya baked him a cake lemon, his favorite. Mrs. Grant came to the small dinner, sitting at the table with Leo on one side and Sophie on the other, laughing at something Leo said with flowers still on her sleeve. Carol Simmons, the former concert pianist who had reached out after the video, had become a quiet, steady presence in their lives. She drove over once a month, sat with Daniel, and talked about music the way other people talked about living, as though it was simply what kept a person going. One afternoon, she told Daniel something he would remember for the rest of his life. "You know what the rarest thing is?" she said. They were sitting at the piano in the living room, the same old scratched piano from Mrs. Grant's garage sale. It's not technical skill. It's not even raw talent. The rarest thing is someone who plays honestly. Someone who lets the audience feel what they feel without hiding, without performing, without pretending. She looked at him. You do that naturally. Guard it. Never let anyone train it out of you. Daniel nodded slowly. Not even Mr. Adebayo? He asked. Carol smiled. Mr. Adebayo knows. That's why he chose you. In May, the music school held its end-of-year student showcase. Daniel was asked to perform. He would play one classical piece he had learned, a short, careful Chopin nocturne, and one original composition. 3 minutes total, a small stage. Maybe 80 people in the audience. Nothing world-changing, except that to Maya. Driving there that evening with Sophie and Leo in the back seat arguing softly about something small and familiar. It felt like the most important night of her life. She thought about 14 months ago, October. The garage sale. A dusty piano with a cracked leg and yellow keys. A $20 decision made on quiet instinct. She thought about Daniel at the window, staring outside. A boy the world kept calling invisible. She parked the car. They walked in together. The four of them. When Daniel walked onto the small stage, the room settled. He sat down at the piano, adjusted the bench in that particular way he always did. Slightly closer than most people would sit, and placed his hands on the keys. He played the Chopin first. Clean, careful, beautiful. Then, a pause. He looked out at the audience for one brief moment, found his mother's face, found Leo's wide-open eyes, found Sophie sitting very straight, trying to look calm, and turned back to the keys. He played his own piece. The room went completely still. It was the same melody from that December night, but grown now, fuller, deeper. With everything 3 months of real training had added to it, the same honest core, but with more room inside it, more space for the listener to enter. When the last note faded, there was a moment of pure silence. Then the room filled with applause. Leo stood up first, a 7-year-old in a slightly too big button shirt, clapping as hard as his small hands could. Sophie stood up a second later, blinking fast. And Maya stood up last, not because she was slow, but because for just 1 extra second, she wanted to hold the moment exactly as it was. Her quiet boy, the one nobody noticed, standing now at the edge of a small stage in a warm room, with his head slightly bowed, receiving something he had always deserved. Being Shin, the hidden talent, was hidden no more, and the family that it changed, the tired mother, the laughing daughter, the superhero little brother, and the quiet boy who finally found his language. They drove home that night, with the windows slightly down, the cool Ohio spring air moving through the car. Nobody said very much. But Leo, from the back seat, said one thing. Danny, can you play something when we get home? Daniel turned and looked at his little brother. Yeah, he said. Will? Clara left on a Tuesday morning in March. Not because Tuesday meant anything special, only because that was the day the money was finally enough for the bus ticket, enough for the first week of a small room she had found on a card pinned to the post office board. The card was written in neat, careful handwriting. The landlady turned out to be exactly as strict about quiet hours as the handwriting suggested. She packed 1 bag, a change of clothes, 2 notebooks, the mechanical pencil worn to almost nothing, and the folded competition certificate she had pressed so many times along its creases that it had gone soft, like old cloth. She left no note. She took no photograph. There was not a single image from that house she wanted to carry forward into whatever came next. She did not say goodbye to her father. He was asleep in the chair. She stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at him for a moment, the same man who had once enrolled in night classes and typed his name under certificates, and dreamed, quietly, of becoming something, and felt nothing theatrical. No fury, No tears. Juste flat, clean feeling of someone who has waited so long for a moment that the real version is only a confirmation of what they already knew. She said goodbye to her mother in the hallway. Her mother held both her hands and looked at her with everything she had never been able to say out loud packed behind her eyes. Then she let go. Clara walked through the front door. It closed behind her with the same sound as every other door on the street, and the ordinary sound of it was the loneliest thing about the whole morning. The city did not welcome her. Cities do not welcome anyone. They simply exist, enormous and indifferent, and wait to see what you will do about it. What the city gave Clara in her first year was this: a narrow room with a window facing a brick wall, a landlady who knocked at 7:30 on Saturdays to discuss the bin rota, a job in a copy center standing under fluorescent lights that hummed at a frequency that got inside your teeth by noon, and the specific loneliness of walking home through streets full of people who were all going somewhere that had nothing to do with you. She ate badly. She slept on a mattress that was not hers. She wore the same 3 outfits in rotation and told herself this was a choice rather than a limitation, which was the kind of small, private lie that kept a person functional. She wrote every day she was not at work, and some mornings before she was, sitting with her back against the radiator and a notebook, balanced on her knee, because the room had one chair and she used it as a desk. In October, she sent her first manuscript to a real publisher. She had researched them for weeks. She had rewritten the cover letter 11 times, until it sounded like a person who was not afraid. She printed it at the copy center on her break and posted it on the way home with the feeling of someone mid-jump who has not yet established whether the ground is close. 6 weeks later, the rejection came. It was polite professionally, warmly, completely, politely worded. It said the work showed real promise, but was not quite right for their list at this time. It wished her well. She put the letter on the refrigerator with a magnet, shaped like a small yellow sun. Not as a wound. As The second rejection arrived in February. The third came on a Thursday in April. The same week, her hours at the copy center were cut, and the landlady mentioned in her mildest voice that the rent would be going up at the end of next month by a number that made Clara do the arithmetic 3 times because she did not believe the first 2 answers. That night, she sat on the floor of her room. The chair was occupied by everything she owned and read her manuscript from the first page to the last. She was looking for the reason to stop. She believed that if she read it honestly enough, carefully enough, she would find the place where it was simply not good enough. The unfixable flaw, and then she could put it down with a clear conscience and find something else to do with her life. She did not find the reason to stop. What she found was harder than that. She found that the manuscript she had written was not quite the story she had lived. The facts were all present. The shoes, the candle dinner, the library, the certificates rotting in the drawer. But somewhere in the writing, she had made it softer than the truth, rounded the sharpest corners, turned the most difficult moments into something a reader could sit with comfortably rather than something that grabbed them by the collar and refused to let go. She had written the whole thing with one hand on the door, ready to take it back if it became too much for anyone. She sat with that understanding for a long time. Then she opened a fresh notebook and began again. The rewrite took 7 months. She did it in the early hours before work, and on her days off and on long Saturday afternoons with her back to the window. This time, she did not protect anyone. Not her father, who had been easier to make complicated on the page than he had ever actually been in life. Not her mother, who she had written as quietly heroic when the truth was more painful and more human than heroism. Not herself, who she had been making sympathetic in a way that was really just another form of smallness. She wrote it the way it actually happened. And the way it actually happened turned out to be more gripping, more devastating, and more true than any version she had softened would ever have been. The fourth rejection arrived while she was halfway through. She noted it. She kept writing. The fifth publisher did not send a letter. De Icolet. A woman's voice, direct and slightly impatient in the way of someone who is genuinely interested and does not have energy to manage your feelings about it. She said she had read the manuscript twice. She said it was the most uncomfortable book she had encountered in 2 years, and that she had thought about it every single day since finishing it, which she considered the only measure of a book that actually meant anything. Clara was standing in the copy center storage room because it was the only place without background noise. She was holding the phone with both hands, without having decided to. She said, "Good." A short silence. Then the woman said she liked that answer. They arranged to speak properly the following week. When Clara hung up, she stood in the storage room without moving for a full minute. Not celebrating, not crying, just breathing steadily, in and out. The way you breathe when something you have been carrying for years and years has just been confirmed, quietly and without ceremony, as real. The book came out the following spring. No launch event, no speeches, just a cover on a shelf in a bookstore Clara passed on her way to work. Sitting between 2 other books that also contained entire lives, their covers gave nothing away about. She stood outside that bookstore for 20 minutes, one cold morning with her coat collar turned up. Not going in, just watching through the glass. A girl came in from the street. 14, maybe 15. Shoes slightly too big, bought to grow into. A backpack with one broken strap hanging off her shoulder at an angle. The girl walked straight to the shelf, picked up Clara's book, read the back, turned it. Aubert read the front, turned it over again, then tucked it under her arm and walked toward the register without ever putting it down. Clara turned and walked to work. She was going to be 2 minutes late. She did not give a single thought to the 2 minutes. She walked with the feeling of someone who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and is just, without witnesses, without applause, without anyone at all stopping to notice, set it down. The struggle did not end that morning, but it had become something larger than a struggle. It had grown, slowly, painfully, across years of rejection and early mornings and floors and broken chair legs in a refrigerator covered in letters she refused to call defeats. It had grown into a story, and the story had found exactly the reader it was always meant for. Behind every struggle is a story worth telling. Behind every story is a person who refused, against every sensible reason, to stop. This was one. There are millions more. Yours might be next.